Welcome to Recovery Report Live. I'm Dan Odess, president of GlobalPro, where we manage risk to recovery, and we've managed more than $1 billion in recovery. I'm so happy to be here in our new Griffin studio. This place is utterly amazing to continue with our broadcast and provide you better content. As you can tell, a little bit of a new setup. We got the new acoustic paneling, the walls, new displays, lighting, cameras, ready to provide you better and more frequent content. I can't wait to start rolling it out. I've been talking about it for a couple weeks about how it's coming and it's coming and it's coming. But with all good things, it takes time, and this is certainly one of those things. But let's get right into some of the issues that are impacting us, particularly in the South Florida region. These rains have absolutely drenched us down here. There's floodwaters everywhere. I mean, the Fort Lauderdale airport doesn't even look like an airport. It looks like a huge lake as of last night. Obviously, it's clearing up. Today, thankfully, we've had a little bit of relief. The water's receded a little bit, and I hear that flights are resuming. I'm assuming that there's probably going to be a lot of canceled and backed up flights, and times are going to be changing, and my heart goes out to all you traveling, particularly with family and young ones. I know firsthand how difficult and stressful that can be. So be patient. It will happen, but more weather is on the way. Later this afternoon and continuing into tomorrow, we're expecting even more rain in South Florida. But I'm not a newscaster, I'm not a meteorologist, and I'm not going to sit here and predict and tell you when it's going to happen or when it's not. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I know more than possibly meteorologists who, quite frankly, as we all know, and I'm sure it's a running joke amongst the community, sometimes meteorologists seems like they're getting paid to tell you the wrong information. But it's based on data. It's based on analytics. It's based on what they see. And quite frankly, sometimes the numbers don't tell the whole story, and things change instantly. So you always want to be prepared, be ready. That's what we've been running, is a massive campaign about being ready. A lot of business owners are asking us about this storm season. I will tell you right now, we've received more phone calls this season than any other prior season about what they can do to be ready for this upcoming storm season. It may feel like storm season right now with these historic rains impacting the South Florida area, but we're not even close to the start of storm season. But that doesn't mean that your year-round preparations shouldn't be top of mind, because things like this can happen. You must be ready. And so we want to make sure that you have the information you can use. That's what this broadcast is about. That's what our website, if you go to globalpro.com, there's tons of information right there on the website where we constantly populate our social media, our website, our downloadable resources for your use as a business owner or community association. Go check it out. And while you're there, hit the like, subscribe, and make sure that you're following us on all of the social media channels. Because as you can see, things change so fast. You want to make sure that you have insurance coverage experts right there helping you navigate the process. It's more complicated now than ever before. As you have seen and as we have talked about, there is change in legislation that has been occurring. There's even more legislation being proposed. Thankfully, as I predicted, the pendulum is starting to swing in favor of the policyholder. There's starting to be talks about real audits, real accountability for insurance companies. In fact, when I took this stage at Latin Builders Association with esteemed representatives of our community, commissioners, mayors, and talked about important issues about construction, real estate, and insurance, it was remarkable how few people actually are talking about what's in the policy and not just the cost. So much so that several of those politicians, elected officials, came up to me afterwards and wanted to sit down with me to talk about what they can do to help their constituents and those that they serve in our community. Why? Because they realize after my long statement regarding insurance and the future of insurance and how it's impacting construction and real estate, that there's not enough talk, real talk, about what's impacting consumers. And yes, we're all sensitive to price. I am, everyone is, every business is, particularly community associations, nonprofits, volunteer board members, hiring vendors to take care of them, and being sold products that, quite frankly, I find are largely not compliant with the Florida statutes. The requirements under Statute 711 and 718 as governing for you as an association. And I say both statutes, while one particularly focused on insurance requirements, the care and maintenance and your obligations and how you reserve, and all of those things contribute to how you transact or what insurance you can buy and how much insurance you need. And we need to look closely at these amenities. We need to look at which ones are necessary, which ones are actually operating, and are any of them increasing our risk profile? Because as I have found, a lot of the policies limit or exclude coverage for the operation of amenities, or because you have those amenities, are contributing to a massive increased cost in your insurance. A real issue that a lot of people are not talking about. Maybe it's time to roll back some of those amenities temporarily or permanently as a consideration to softening the cost or expense of operating your association in these hard times. Hard times because we have a hard market. It's also an uncertain economic market, and it could help your unit owners. It's something to think about. Business owners, operators, think about your operations. Look at your coverage for income coverages. I will tell you right now, particularly in a hard economic market, it's probably better to look at some of your operations, maybe roll back on certain things, or look for ways in which you can save money, but make sure that you're insured to the max on the income coverages. Why? Because you need the dollars to go further following a loss, particularly with, we still have supply issues, certainly have a labor issue in some of the coastal areas, particularly where we have a lot of vacationers. We're heading into the summer months. Obviously, storm season is right there alongside when all of the hottest times for vacationers to be in the South Florida market. It's a hot time outside, but it's also a hard market, so you want to make sure that you're paying close attention to those things. But getting back to the current weather in the situation, one of the questions that I fielded this morning from a significant operator of multifamily as well as some hotels and other hospitality areas where they have commercial real estate, that they have restaurants and other sort of tenants in there. They're asking me about their obligations to mitigate because as they had expressed to me that some of the restaurant operators are more late lunch dinner operators and not morning. And here we are in the morning hours with tons of water in these locations. Is it their obligation or is it the tenant's obligation to mitigate? And unfortunately, you need to look at the lease agreement. And that's important to look at the lease agreement for insurable risk and obligations. We all have a duty and obligation to mitigate, and I would assume that you, as an operator, owning the real estate in which you lease to tenants, has information inside the lease agreement which would govern who's responsible for ensuring aspects or portions of the building and would be liable or obligated to perform services in order to mitigate. So it's really important that you look to those lease agreements and don't just assume that if you spend the money to do it, as a good person, because you're trying to protect your tenant, that you are going to be reimbursed or paid back by your insurance company, and your claim is going to be fairly paid or adjusted by their representatives. That's not the case. You need to look closely at your insurance policies and understand who is obligated to carry that flood insurance, who's obligated to insure or manage a risk from a casualty, whether it's an act of God, something on-site, off-site, something a contributing factor that may be because of the design issue, et cetera, et cetera. These are all important things that go into the decision-making process for an insurance company as to why why not they're going to pay you for those damages. So make sure you're talking to your tenant, being open about it, and referring to that lease agreement. Right now is a good time to brush it off, pull it out, take a look at it. But at the end of the day, you need to act. So no matter what, you need to move on it. And if you do incur the expense, but let's say your tenant is obligated to perform those duties, you could seek reimbursement from that tenant, and that tenant can submit it in their claim as a cost of the mitigation, because you do have an obligation as a tenant. If you are holding the insurance and the insurance in your name, in order for that flood insurance, you need to make sure that you perform those duties. Now, if the roof failed or the windows are failing, again, look at the lease agreement first, look at who has the insurable interest, who's responsible for the care and maintenance, who's responsible for insuring against casualties, acts of God, things that you want to look for in these lease agreements. Don't just assume that your broker got it right. Most brokers I know don't even know how to read lease agreements. If they asked for it, they probably never even looked at it and they passed it on to the underwriter. I'm sorry to say it, that's been our experience. And when we ask questions of the broker, why is there certain coverage missing or included, they kind of look at us with a blank stare at and just give us some sort of market response, something they've been coached to say or do during that process. So make sure you look closely at those things, make sure you understand where you may have coverage or where you may not, and where your obligations begin and end. It's really, really important. And for community associations, do you have an elevated pool deck? I can't tell you how often community associations improperly report a claim for damages caused by water damage that starts or originates from a pool deck, an elevated pool deck. That is not the same as a flood from a river or a nearby body of water or a storm drain system. And also be careful of talking about drains or how drains may have caused or contributed to those losses. Particularly now with these new policies, there's a lot of language in there about drains. In fact, most of the coverage for water seems to be stripped of most commercial policies that have been sold to community associations. Also, roof drains is another one. If your roof fails during these major events and water damage is caused, again, that's what it is. You have water damage. Don't be an expert in roofing. Don't be an engineer. Be the property manager or be the board member. You only know what you know. Don't hypothesize as the origination of it, except for the fact that you've had this major extreme storm, the storm that has caused damage. And understand that there may be limitations to water that may have gotten into the property or building through storm-created openings. But is it a hurricane? Is it a windstorm? Is it a named windstorm? Those are all things that you need to understand in the policy and how they work together in those limiting endorsements and policy conditions. Because you may have a non-windstorm coverage that may apply here for an event like we're seeing unfold. Because these are supercell events that are occurring. They're concentrated high-pressure systems and low-pressure systems that are creating these massive weather meteorologic events that are causing damage to your property. So it's really important you understand the interplay in language and the context of your policy, how it's going to be interpreted, either for coverage or against it. And if it's against it, is it rightfully denied or wrongfully denied? We need to make sure that we understand and investigate coverage for you. This is a contract that's been written by an insurance company, not you. You didn't go through it and redline it and edit and mark it up. There's a more technical term called contract adhesion where they wrote it, but you did it and you accept it, but they must accept that if it's ambiguous, then it's construed into your benefit, meaning that if something is not clearly written, then coverage is afforded, not taken away. It's not interpreted to their benefit, it's interpreted to yours as the policy holder. Now, while those are so complicated concepts to talk about, it's good to talk about those things so you have some sort of familiarity with this concept, with this idea that maybe things aren't the way that your broker or the insurance company are saying they are. Maybe there is, in fact, coverage for your storm damage. So look closely at that. Understand that, obviously, water damage from an elevated pool deck or a roof, balconies, lanais, whatever it may not be considered flood, backup, drain-related, or some sort of limited coverage or excluded cause of loss. So be careful about how you report those claims. Your broker does not work for you when managing a loss. They don't. They don't work for the insurance company either unless explicitly written and documented in some way. The only representatives that are working for you are licensed public adjusters or attorneys. Now, public adjusters and attorneys have probably gotten a pretty bad rap. I think you would assume that over the last couple of years, you've heard a lot of negative campaigning against public adjusters and attorneys. The tables are turning. The recent Washington Post article about the rampant fraud going on with one insurer. You have class action lawsuits by insurance independent adjusters that represent insurance companies blowing a whistle, showing people that the insurance companies are taking their work product and changing it without merit, making changes but leaving their name and their information on it and representing to the policyholder that those reports were actually written by those adjusters, but they're not. And the adjusters are the eyes and ears of the insurance company out in the field. The insurance companies are taking issue with it and editing and modifying it to save themselves money or expense or cost, which is your claim. But we want to make sure that you get a fair deal. You want to make sure you have representation. As a fiduciary, a board member, a property manager, you have that financial obligation to protect the financial interest of your fellow unit owners. If without representation, how do you plan on doing that? I know you're an attorney or a former broker, and you understand the law and you understand insurance, but you don't adjust claims. And also, you're in a fiduciary role to your fellow unit owners. So You need to objectively look at these things, understand the role players in the claims process, and make sure that your interests are in fact being protected, particularly now in these tough financial situation where you have a hard insurance market, you have an uncertain economy. You want to make sure that you are getting dollar for dollar what you are paying for in your insurance policy. And if there's anything that we can do to help you here at GlobalPro, you want to understand a little bit more about the interplays of flood and water damage and why an elevated pool deck and water damage that may cause damage to your property, okay, water causing damage to the interior property would not be considered flood in your situation. Reach out to us, let us know. We'll come out, we'll do a free assessment, we'll walk the property, understand the mechanics of your building, look at the systems, the plumbing systems, look at the roofing systems, and understand what went wrong, what caused the loss, what failed. How are you covered for that? How did you buy insurance? What is your understanding of the intentions when you bought that insurance? What was your understanding of the intention of the insurance company when they sold you that product? Do you believe you're covered? Do you believe that your broker sold you the right policy? We'll do an analysis of that. We'll look at your claims. We'll make sure that they're accurately reported to your insurance company and that you expediently get paid for what you're entitled to under your policy. We want to make sure you have the information you can use. That's what this report is all about, the Recovery Report Live. We go live every Thursday at 11 o'clock right here in the Griffin studio to provide you information like this that you, as a policyholder, can use to protect your interest. But at the end of the day, with complex situations and issues like flood losses or storm-related claims, you want to make sure that you have experts on your side, making sure that you are getting a fair deal. And that's what we're going to continue doing for you by providing you this information and also by representing your interest whenever and however we can while you are trying to recover from a loss. So check us out online at globalpro.com. There's a resource section, plenty of downloadable information there, as well as the contact information to talk to our insurance coverage expert team about what's going on in your situation and helping you navigate through it. If you want our help and you want us to represent you, we'll walk you through that process. It's easy. It's straightforward. It's not intended to inflate or undervalue your loss. It's to ensure that you're getting dollar for dollar what you're paying for. We want to hit the mark. Why? We want to make sure that you're getting paid promptly and accurately for the damages you have suffered and for the insurance for which you've been paying for through the teeth. It's particularly in this hard market. So if there's anything we can do, reach out to us. Let us know. Hit us up on social media. Shoot us an email. Call us, 855-487-7475. However you are most comfortable with reaching out to us, we have made it easy for you to get a hold of us 24/7, 365 days a year. We want to make sure the information you can use. That's what we're doing here at the Recovery Report Live every Thursday at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, delivering you information that you can use. So make sure you tune in next week, right here, right now, on the Recovery Report Live. Thank you so much for joining and tuning us for this week. We'll see you again next week, right here on the Recovery Report Live.